I almost forgot that time where my mom went after Jima with a big watermelon knife. The things we forget. So I'm like 11 years old and my cult leader grandmother comes to me and she's like, your mother just tried to unalive me with a knife. And we're all living in the same house and I'm horrified because our whole cult is focused on running away from a satanic organization that is trying to unalive us all, led by my father. So it's deeply concerning to me that both of my parents might be unalivers. So I go into the other room and I confront my mom and I'm like, did you try to unalive grandma? And she like rolls her eyes and she's like, oh my gosh, did she tell you that? Which I feel is a very inappropriate response. But then she goes on to explain. She's like, no, I did not try to unalive Jima. Quick side note for context. So when people ask me like, oh, what sorts of meals did your mom cook growing up? I go into a bit of like a, how much do I tell them? Because I didn't have like meals growing up. Like there was food that was left out on the counter. And then my brother and I would just sort of like scavenge throughout the day. And this was true when it came to watermelon. So there was like a half watermelon, just like a big watermelon cut in half on the counter, turning more and more into like a fine wine. But nobody cut up watermelon. There was just a watermelon to eat whenever we walk by. So I'm a kid that has had no watermelon etiquette training in my cult. So you see half a watermelon and there's one part of it without any seeds, which is the heart of the watermelon. So someone, it might have been me, took a spoon and just carved out a bite of the middle of the watermelon. Jima sees this and she is livid. So my mom was like, Jima came to me and she was freaking out and saying that we owe her everything and that she saved us from the Satan worship and that she should have the heart of the watermelon. That it's so insulting that we would eat the heart of the watermelon and leave her with, and I quote, the pig's portion. I guess the pig's portion was for us. So now my mom is really mad and insulted. So she grabs a huge knife. You know when you get a knife set and there are like lots of different sizes, and then there's that one that's just like this humongous knife that you don't really know what to use for anything and it usually goes in a drawer. Well, my mom happened to grab the biggest knife in the house, which to this day I know as the watermelon knife. And she's determined to prove to Jima that there's still plenty of watermelon left. She starts like angrily carving up this watermelon. Jima is freaking out, totally insulted. So my mom's like at the counter, angrily cutting this watermelon, and Jima is behind her, like flailing her arms, trying to grab the knife away from my mother. My mother is worried about accidentally cutting Jima because her hands are flailing in the way of the knife. But she is 100% determined to never stop carving up this fruit because she's proving a point. So she turns around, knife in hand, to push Jima out of the way. Now, you know how when you're like walking into an office building and you push the door, but it's like a lot lighter than you thought it was gonna be? So instead of a regular door opening, it's like this, whoa, like you like slam the door open essentially because you've misjudged the heaviness of the door. Well, that's what happened with Jima's body. My mom was like, she was a lot lighter than I thought she was gonna be. So the pushing her out of the way turned into her stumbling back and like falling on the counter on the other side of the kitchen. Well, my mother is holding up this gigantic knife. So Jima is in hysterics and she comes running to 11-year-old me to tell me that my mother is an unaliver and just tried to unalive her with a knife. So my mother and my brother still live in Jima's basement, totally controlled by her in the cult. And as she describes this to people, she really emphasizes how incredibly generous this is because she's letting people live with her that have tried to unalive her before. And my mother, to this day, says that Jima is really dramatic and lies about stuff. Not the whole cult story we were told, of course, but lies about watermelon stuff. So put in the comments, who do you believe? Jima that lied to me my whole life? Or was it my mom that lied to me my whole life? Who do we believe?